I have an awesome interview for you on deck today. It is with Jesse, the CEO of Bloom, which you're looking at right now. They're a company that is trying to really revolutionize and globalize credit and credit scoring, utilizing the blockchain, utilizing Ethereum and IPFS. And the interview, the conversation was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I think you are going to as well. So without further ado, let's hop into the interview. If you are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. But let's turn it over to Jesse and get this thing started.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I've been following your videos for a while, so it's great to meet you as well. I studied computer science with my now co-founders John and Alan at Stanford a few years ago. We actually all left Stanford to work on our various startups. But John and Alan co-founded the Stanford Bitcoin group back in early 2013. And so we've kind of been following cryptocurrency in depth. I worked on an enterprise analytics company that sold software to Fortune 500s. They worked on an identity and compliance company that powers the vast majority of U.S. exchanges for compliance and identity verification. And recently, in the last this year, we started kind of refocusing our skills to work on Bloom together.
Sure. And one thing, I guess, out of your background that I'm sure a lot of people ask and gets brought up, especially I think in the cryptocurrency space too, but the whole kind of Peter Thiel, Teal Foundation, what was that like? I guess could you talk a little bit about kind of how the participation in that was for you, and maybe how that's going to affected any type of just career trajectory for you, or really just how you've shaped things with that as well?
Yeah, so I'm in the Teal Fellowship, which for those of you that don't know it's Peter Thiel essentially gives students $100,000 equity-free, no strings attached, to drop out of college. Vitalik got it before he even did the Ethereum crowd sale. Joey Krug, which is one of the first applications built on Ethereum, Augur, is also a Teal Fellow. So it's quite the mini crypto community, if you will. The foundation, the fellowship, really is good for meeting other people. There's not a lot of young entrepreneurs that actually have traction. And so just from a networking perspective, to have people that are going through the same things, it's really powerful. And it's a nonprofit, and it sounds kind of silly that it's a nonprofit, but they really do just do everything in their power to support founders in terms of exposure, meeting people. The cash is obviously great. And so the aspect of leaving school is really a very small fraction of it.
Yeah, and I'm sure this isn't the first time it's been brought up, and probably won't be the last, because it seems like, too, at least to me, anything that Vitalik has ever had any type of involvement with in the cryptocurrency space, and whether it's somebody that's taken a damn selfie with him, or obviously something a lot more substantial like being involved in the Teal Fellowship, and having that similarity. I mean, I think that's pretty cool. But I think one of the big things too, kind of going off points that I'm sure that I've already seen you speak a little bit about in the news, and seems almost a little bit kind of sucks for everybody else involved, and I'm one of those people. But the Equifax hack, this, as far as Bloom goes, this kind of seems almost like perfect timing to have this type of project going with the Equifax hack, and basically everybody on the planet not being too excited about having their credit score in a single repository, whether or not they even knew it. So can you talk a little bit maybe about just general thoughts on the Equifax hack? I'd be kind of curious to hear kind of what you're thinking there, and maybe how that is influencing anything moving forward for Bloom.
Launched literally the day before the Equifax announcement, which was uncanny timing. It's obviously a pretty egregious hack. The CEO is getting replaced now. They're facing a $70 billion class action lawsuit, which is more than the total value of the company. And it's not the first time a central credit bureau has been hacked either. Experian, one of the other big three credit bureaus, got hacked just 2 years ago. And so when the information is stored in a central provider in a way that's easily accessible, it's very vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And it's obviously bad that this happened, but I think in the weeks leading up to our announcement, not everyone intuitively understood why and hashing and keeping information out of central hands is important, and that's a key pillar of Bloom. In addition to making credit inclusive and global, we're also making the credit system secure, and that wasn't immediately understood by people, but the Equifax hack really helped draw that out. So much so that one of the people I followed for years, Brian Krebs, he runs Krebs and Security, a big security blog. He even tweeted out Bloom as a potential fact that this is good from a security, and I think it really highlighted to lenders and to people that will become our data providers that being central does not mean being more secure.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's kind of funny too because I think it was maybe 6 months ago, both my wife and I, we my wife a couple months before I did, but really myself. I got a credit card in the mail it was a legitimate. I get the credit cards all the time in the mail that are like the fake credit card that have the sticker on it that's like, hey, sign up here at the website. I actually got a credit card in the mail that was to me and opened up in my name, and somebody I guess had a bunch of my information. Somewhere something got hacked and they had my information enough to open up a credit card in my name, and I ended up having to do a whole credit freeze and all that type of stuff. And I ended up, I need to cancel it, but I still pay Experian, or not Experian, actually Equifax, like $30 a month for a family monitoring plan to hopefully not have my stuff hacked again. And then Equifax is actually the one I'm paying.
I'll tell you something interesting. The credit freeze, they push that as a great solution, and they add a 4-digit that basically in order to open up a credit account, you have to have the 4-digit PIN, which sounds great. Obviously that information isn't leaked. Turns out on Experian, you can, with just the 4-PIN, with just your SSN, you can reset the 4-digit PIN.
Yeah.
So the whole PIN system is trying to protect the fact that you can't get access to a credit account without the 4-digit PIN, but you can reset the 4-digit PIN with the same information that's leaked online. So it's kind of, if that was a decentralized system, that would be like redlined in the white paper right from the start as a security flaw, but the central companies don't exactly see it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know kind of getting to the point too. I mean, we've talked a little bit and alluded to it, and I have the website up right now, and our little face is tiny thanks to Google Hangouts not being able to handle it tonight. But as far as Bloom goes, and I know a lot of people have heard about it, but I'm sure some of the people watching this haven't. Can you talk from like an elevator pitch perspective, like a 60-second overview? What is Bloom and what are you trying to do in the future?
Basically, around the world, credit faces a number of problems. In China, your political affiliation influences your score. In a lot of countries, your religious affiliation influences your score. Even in the UK, to vote, it's very difficult to get a credit score. In the United States, credit scores are backward-looking, meaning you have to have debt to have a high credit score. So for millennials, that's a big problem. A lot of millennials don't like credit cards. About half of millennials, some stats say more, don't even have a credit card, which means they can't get a mortgage, a loan, they can't get a loan to start a business. And when the credit system was built, it was built at a time when there was not a lot of data available. It was built when we didn't have the ecosystems that we have today. So Bloom aims to make a global credit score, a score that works everywhere, not just for people who have debt, not just in nations that have a strong infrastructure. So we're trying to make credit more global and more fair and not influenced by governments and big banks.
Awesome. And it's funny that you mentioned that too, and I've even just reading through your white paper, which we'll definitely talk about, but kind of brought me back to, so I work in Manhattan, I work in software, and then I work specifically with like financial services companies. One of the companies I was working with, their entire business model is basically they work with wealthy Japanese individuals who are trying to move from Japan to Manhattan, and because they are from Japan, they don't have credit in the United States, and even though they might have millions of dollars in the bank, they actually can't rent an apartment in the U.S., so this company basically just finances them and acts as their co-signer and backer. So I thought at the time, I thought that was I just really hadn't even heard of that, number one, being an industry, and number two, that even really being that much of a problem, especially for people that have probably net worths well above $5 million. And to hear that somebody who has a net worth that high can't get an apartment because they don't have a credit score, that when I was reading through your white paper, that was like exactly one of the use cases that kind of came to my mind as something that was interesting.
Yeah, credit scores, they're not portable across borders. I mean, and so if you move to another country, you restart with no credit. Yeah. And if you have no credit, a lot of landlords won't rent to you. You can't live in the good part of town often. And so that's just a problem of centralization. That basically in most countries, the credit bureaus are essentially monopolies or close to it. In the U.S., FICO is 90% of lenders use FICO. And that's a problem because that means the scores don't work when you move, and a lot of the people that want to move have the financial means to move, and they go back to basically being, a newcomer to credit, which until now, until Bloom, it's been a lot of these weird workarounds, companies that provide these support services, which are not cheap either.
No.
So we hope to, in addition to making it more fair, make it cross-border.
Yeah, gotcha. And into the actual kind of like Bloom product or platform, and how you're working it. I know there's kind of three primary portions of it. There's the Bloom ID, Bloom IQ, and then the Bloom Score. Can you talk about each of those three aspects of Bloom and how those are kind of impactful and important as far as moving the company forward and allowing for that inclusive credit globally?
Absolutely. Like you said, there are three components. Bloom ID, which is a global standard identity. Bloom IQ, which pulls in information. It's a way to pull in data about somebody's ability to repay a debt, their creditworthiness. And then Bloom Score, which is built on top of Bloom ID. Bloom Score takes the identity information and data and creates a standard credit score. The way we do this is it's a novel approach. It's a new approach. Bloom IQ doesn't rely on any one central party. Today, when you verify your identity, it typically relies on one central party to say, yes, you are who you say you are, which has a bunch of risks. Basically, data leaks is a big one. We just saw this in Equifax. So what Bloom ID does to combat this is it makes the ID system trustless. It establishes an ID, and third-party nodes, third-party verifiers, sign on your ID that they've verified you, that they've checked who you are. And in this way, it allows for no personal information to be stored on the blockchain, but it allows for lenders to trust the same people that they trust today to verify your ID, and it isn't limited by data that's available in one country. It works globally.
Sure.
So the system's really built on that Bloom ID, and then with that, we're able to pull in a lot of information about you, and then once we have the ID and the information about you, we're able to score you.
Absolutely. And to that point, too, from a Bloom Score perspective, what type of factors is it going to be similar to kind of the traditional methods of credit scoring? Or are you taking, I somewhat know the answer, but I definitely want to hear kind of your take on it too. But as far as like the approach you're taking to scoring credit, what's that going to be like for you and the team?
Good question. We are porting in the traditional metrics. So at the start, it's at least going to be as good as the traditional credit scores because they're going to be a part of Bloom Score. But in addition to that, there's a lot of rich information, utility bill data, cell phone data, loans that aren't reported to the credit bureaus, your financial situation, cash flow information. There's a lot of additional data that's not currently factored into most credit scores that has been proven time and time again by academics to correlate closer to your ability to repay a debt. And we're going to port all that information in. Sure. But at the very start, it's at least going to be as good because the traditional credit metrics are being ported in. And over time, as we have data to track how our metrics correlate, the score will improve.
Absolutely. And, kind of going with that as well from like a partnership perspective, I imagine relationships both from like you just said, from the ability to kind of port in data, as well as I'm sure kind of partnerships to kind of extend and expand the reach of Bloom. What do you have in mind from that aspect? Are there specific kind of partners that you're looking at, either on the credit side, or to expand basically kind of the number of people who end up creating a Bloom ID and trying to get a score within Bloom? I guess, do you have any thought process on like whether it's a partner model or distribution model of how that looks at this point in time, or how that will look?
Absolutely. Partners are critical. Kind of like Bitcoin needs their miners in order to run the network. We need our trusted nodes. We need our ID providers and our data providers to join the network. Today, most of them have business models where they earn money for selling data and verifying identities. So we will fit in. Essentially, Bloom will look a lot like a customer for them. But if you follow our newsletter, we'll be announcing these periodically as they become available. But my co-founders have spent quite a few years in the identity and compliance space, so there's a number of partnerships that we can leverage from a relationship standpoint. But for the most part, we are relying heavily on, at scale, it'll be tens of thousands of data providers in every country in order to make this a global network. By default, there is no one data provider that has information on the whole globe, and so in order to create a global system, we have to have work with those data providers that have their little piece of the pie.
Sure. And with a global system, are you going to specifically, like, let's say, be starting in the United States or trying to gather a larger user group in the United States? Is it just kind of curious as far as kind of from the perspective of having those data providers and things like that? Is it easier for you to kind of get a foothold in the United States and slowly expand elsewhere? Or are you trying to open it up to the entire globe off the bat somehow with multiple data providers and try to make it open from that respect?
It's definitely easier to get data on people in rich, where information is rich. So in the United States, Europe, there's a lot of good information about people, whereas in certain markets, there's less information available about them, which is why there's billions of people in those markets don't have a credit score today. Now, the system will work extremely well for people in the U.S., especially millennials that don't have a credit score, which is just due to inefficiencies in scoring. Yeah. We intend to be global relatively quickly. We're already establishing partners around the globe. Likely, there'll be some tendency for lenders to lean towards markets they're familiar with, U.S., Europe. But we're establishing the protocol right out of the gate to work globally. And then the rate that it expands at is just going to depend on which markets we have enough partners in order to have loans be issued there.
Gotcha. And one of the things that I saw that was interesting to me, and I think there's a couple different companies trying to do this already in the blockchain crypto space, but I think they're doing it for different reasons. But in the white paper, you mentioned the Bloom card and kind of what that is and the concept of that. Could you talk a little bit about what the Bloom card is and how that adds to your business model or to the growth of Bloom going forward as well?
Yep. So Bloom is actually at scale. It's not going to be a lender. We plan on lending no funds out of Bloom. Lenders will use Bloom in the same way they use FICO or credit bureaus today. Lenders will use our protocol and then they'll lend the money. That being said, in order to show that the system works, we will be creating the first proof of concept called the Bloom card, which much like some of the Bitcoin and Ethereum debit cards out there, the Bloom card will be a Bitcoin/Ethereum, whatever you want to call it, credit card. It will allow you to register a Bloom score and actually have a credit card that you can spend real money in real places. We have all of the infrastructure in place to do that right now. We still haven't yet decided whether we're going to use our own funds to actually power the card or whether there's a lender. We have a few lenders that want to back it, so we're working out the specifics.
Gotcha. Yeah, I thought that was interesting just for kind of a number of different reasons too, like you just mentioned, and kind of how that relates. And there's, like you said, there's I think three companies off the top of my head that are somewhat larger companies, at least within the crypto space, that are basically just sole credit card or debit card companies. So the fact that this isn't kind of it's it's a piece of the puzzle for you guys that is pretty
proof of concept.
Yeah.
Just so lenders can, it also lets us, very early on deploy the protocol in a live environment, hash out the details. So that way, that way we don't have lenders taking early risk. But at scale, it's going to quickly be replaced by lenders with more capital and more global reach.
Sure. And from a roadmap perspective, I know there was kind of a multi-phased roadmap that you had within the white paper as well. But I'd love to hear, I mean, it could be a pretty brief synopsis, but just like an overall kind of strategy from a roadmap perspective of how where we're at right now and where, maybe future state ideal vision is for you and the team at Bloom.
Totally. We are shaping up to have a testnet launch very early 2018. Could come sooner, but targeting early 2018, which that will be the full vision of the protocol. I wouldn't suggest issuing live loans off of that yet, but we've got quite a substantial code base written. We have, for a lot of markets, not quite the whole globe yet, but in many markets we've got all of the relationships needed to establish IDs and pull in data. The protocol code is going to be less of a challenge than the relationships, over the next year, and so we should be on pace to have a testnet launch early 2018, and then from there, it's just going to take a lot of time to hash out the bugs, hash out the details, and really keep, amping up and getting traction.
Absolutely. And then, to that point as well, I know there's going to be, at one point or another, there's going to be a Bloom token. It's mentioned again in the white paper too, and for anybody who's watching this later on, definitely recommend the white paper just came out. Definitely recommend going ahead and reading that through in its entirety. Really, really chock full of information and good stuff in there. So nice job on that. But with the actual, with the Bloom token itself, what is kind of the utility going to be of that Bloom token, and could you talk a little bit about kind of the usefulness of that when that eventually does come to fruition?
There are three main uses of our token. The first and the most important is decentralized governance. Right now, any central credit bureau quickly falls victim to the influence of the government that they operate in. And we don't want to be manipulated or controlled by a government. We want this to work in all nations. And so by tying the token to your vote, this allows it to be democratic in the sense that one token equals one vote. But aside from that, the token actually plays a role in the ecosystem, one for anti-fraud purposes and two for payments and settlement. For anti-fraud, we don't want an attacker to be able to create fake Bloom IDs. And so in order to mitigate that, there's a small fee in tokens to verify your identity and submit a request to create a Bloom ID, which for one person is negligible. But for a hacker or a bad actor that might be trying to brute force millions of IDs, suddenly now the cost to generate a fake ID becomes exponential, which is far more than they would get if they received a loan. And so, to recap, governance is the main one. Sure. Fraud prevention is the second one by issuing certain components where the tokens are needed. And then payments and settlements is the obvious one. The data providers and the ID providers have to get paid for their services, and they'll receive token for that.
Gotcha. And with the tokens in general, is there, I don't recall from the white paper, but do you have a specific time frame from, is there going to be an ICO? Is there going to be a token sale? Is there a specific time frame yet outlined for that, or is that not necessarily the main priority as far as things moving forward right now?
We haven't announced a token sale yet. Right now, we're pretty heads down in ensuring that we have the relationships globally to, work. We've been pretty heads down in the product. When we launched, we were actually expecting the first day went exactly as we planned. We had a few dozen people really into the white paper analyzing the code, which is exactly what we'd hoped for. But then the Equifax hack happened the next day, and so Bloom kind of our path and roadmap got a bit expedited. Which was a good thing. So, we're thinking about all options at this point, but we haven't officially announced a token sale yet.
Sure. And you've mentioned some of the background of your team from the identity kind of verification space within KY identity verification, KYC, obviously your own background as well. I think it seems like there might be a couple other companies out there somewhat attacking this type of problem or portions of the problem at once. How would you say your team is uniquely positioned to to kind of fulfill your vision? Obviously, it's a really broad vision. If it can, if you can come close to anywhere near kind of what the goal is, obviously that's going to be a big, in my opinion, that'd be really good value add really for basically for a lot of people in the world. So how do you guys feel you're uniquely positioned to really deliver on what you're trying to do?
There are people tackling certain portions of the identity and verification space, and I would assume, and some of them have already reached out to become trusted nodes on Bloom, and so we're pretty welcoming of people that are able to provide portions of the ecosystem. We're actually, in some ways, we're providing no portions of the ecosystem. We're just providing the protocol for other people to provide it. But as far as our background specifically, we've been in crypto for a while. We studied computer science at Stanford. We've been in, my co-founders have been in the identity verification compliance space for a while, so they've got a lot of familiarity in terms of, regulatory compliance and ensuring that, what we do while decentralized is respected by governments around the world. This isn't our first company either. I bootstrapped my first company in high school to over $1 million in sales selling hats.
I saw that.
And then we both raised and managed, millions of dollars in venture capital fund before. And so there's a lot of excellent players in the crypto community, but I think we have a little bit more relevant traction and experience running companies that I think will help make Bloom successful.
Gotcha. And with the success of Bloom, kind of going to that as well, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to the success and to the widespread adoption of Bloom? Is there anything that either keeps you up at night or you and your team are really kind of working hard to remove that obstacle in the future? Is there anything there that kind of comes to mind?
Yeah, no, there's quite a few things. I mean, we're trying to essentially not just replace FICO and the credit bureaus, but do the same thing for the rest of the globe, in 180 other markets. And so it's an astronomically massive problem that we're trying to tackle. And from a technical standpoint, we have the technical chops to build it, and a lot of it's already built. And so we're not as much worried about the technical standpoint as we are worried about, governments around the world. We've seen what's happened in China, and we've seen, that governments can take an aggressive stance against decentralized protocols, especially ones that are not fully in their control. And in order for this to succeed, we need to be on the same side as governments. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a lot of ensuring that we are compliant, ensuring that we provide them the information they want. We're taking the most compliant route we possibly could. I mean, we're going to and planning on working hand in hand with regulators around the world. But even so, we can see what happens in certain markets where something appears that they don't like, mm-hmm. and that could be a bit of an existential threat. But we hope that the power of decentralization in the crowd will prove to win out over strong central actors.
Sure. And with a lot of what you said, I'd imagine too, and I'd just kind of be interested in hearing it as well from the aspect of regulation, even from like a legal and accounting, has that been more strenuous than maybe you had imagined, or as you're, or in the future as you're looking into this, kind of whether it's with regulation, if it's legal, if it's accounting, if it's just kind of dealing with these kind of administrative roadblocks per se, has that been somewhat difficult? I just, in my head, I'm imagining these new businesses in crypto.
And it's crypto, just and then you also have, financial. And so it's kind of like two markets. But we've operated in tightly regulated spaces before, mm-hmm. and our team is extremely familiar with managing regulators. And fortunately, we are opting towards being more compliant, being more regulatory friendly. And so it's pretty easy for us. We're just taking the safest routes possible, compliant with over the top with more regulations than we even need to. But it definitely adds an administrative hurdle, right? There's so many countries out there. There's so many different laws, and to be, compliant with all of them takes a lot of work. And so it takes a lot of time. But I think there's really no other way for us to do it.
Yeah. And that's one thing that, I mean, at least when I'm looking at these new projects like yourself, and at least in crypto, to me, there kind of seems like there's almost two ways. There's just like this screw it, we don't give a crap about regulation, and then there's the, we're gonna take this slow and be measured and go through the right processes. And especially in the U.S. now, I think there's really only one way to do things, and it's the way you're going about it in that kind of measured and intelligent fashion, in my opinion. So good to hear that you're taking that approach there as well. And from my standpoint, I think that looking at a lot of the kind of questions I was really interested in, that covers the majority of really what I wanted to, or the topics that I thought were kind of pressing to me, and I think a lot of the audience that I have. But from your perspective, is there anything maybe that I didn't ask, or that you would like to tell anybody who is interested in Bloom moving forward from a platform perspective, or just anything of that nature that you feel like would be good to tell anybody watching?
Two things. One, we are really looking to the community for direction and feedback here. I mean, our whole ecosystem is going to be governed by the community, and right now we have we're working with a friend of mine from Stanford who was a researcher there. We put together a credit survey, and we're looking to get the community and even people outside of our community to fill out the survey. It's intended to not only guide the direction of the protocol, but ensure that we do our due diligence and address the right problems around the world. And so looking to get feedback from as many people as possible in our survey right now. And then just generally speaking, we are active constantly on Slack daily, and our team pretty much lives in there. And so to the extent people have questions, we really encourage people to come talk directly with us. Online discussions is welcomed too, but when we have people talk directly with us, we love that.
Sure. Yeah, I know.
There you are, right there.
Yeah, clicking on the Slack. I'm in a few, but I'll definitely make sure to join yours as well. I love Slack. I'm sure it's kind of a headache now for you guys. I think you said you had 2,000 people or so in there, which is pretty
all in the last couple of weeks too. So we're adding something like over 100 people a day. I think we're joining right now.
Well, that's a good
sign.
Pretty
crazy.
It's definitely a good sign.
Yeah, we're happy. I mean, the Equifax thing was it was blessing and a curse. Obviously it's terrible that it happened, but it really did help draw a lot of attention to Bloom, and it's helped paint our case to the people we've been talking to over the last year about Bloom. And so it couldn't have come at a better time. But we're really thankful for the community engagement it's helped generate.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers. Whatever it was, 140 million people, or basically anybody with a damn credit card in the U.S., but you guys at Bloom are probably the only people that is somewhat happy about it. Obviously not happy that a lot of people, I'm sure, including myself, definitely myself, I didn't even check, because I didn't even do the kind of the enter the last four of your social and your name. I didn't even bother, because
they put in a term that said if you did that, you waived your rights.
Action. Yeah, no thank you. No thank you.
I don't think it held up, but it's crazy that was even in there in the first place.
That they even tried that, yeah. Seriously, take a hike. But that mostly covers really what I wanted to talk about. So I really appreciate your time. It was sorry for the technical difficulties in the beginning here, but it was awesome to speak with you, and I'm excited to see where Bloom continues to go in the future. You guys are taking on a really ambitious problem, and I think that like you said, I think you have a really good team in place to solve it and to do a great job of that. So I'm excited to see it. I think a lot of people within my audience are going to be really happy to listen to this and to hear this. So I'm excited and looking forward to kind of getting this up online and passing this information around. And if you need anything from me at all moving forward, I'm absolutely really happy to help out for sure.
Well, I'm a big fan of you and your community. I've watched a lot of your videos. I think it's great that people like you are stepping up to become thought leaders and help guide the space. And so really just glad I can be part of it.
So I hope you guys enjoyed that video, that recording with Jesse. I really did. Hope it was educational and gives you an eye into kind of what some really interesting people in the space that are working hard to kind of revolutionize and tackle big problems are thinking about and doing. I would definitely recommend taking a look at the white paper, like I said before. I'll link to that in the show notes. Thank you guys so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm sure Jesse does as well. My name is Rob from Crypto Bobby. Hit that subscribe button if you are new here. Again, I would really appreciate that. Hope you have a good one. Peace.